All right, this morning we're going to start our Christmas series here, and it's called Another in the Fire. And this is why we sang that song this morning, because we want to wrap our minds around the fact that when Jesus came, he came as a baby, but it wasn't just to be a baby. It was to be with us through the fires of life. Many times we get caught up in just the time of the year and the manger and the baby laying there, and we forget that he came as a conquering king. And so this week and the next few weeks, we're going to look at how he's come to help us through the fire, socially, physically, and then on the 22nd, if there's one Sunday you don't want to miss, I don't want you to miss any of the Sundays. You don't want to miss December 22nd. We're going to look how he's come for us through the mental aspects of being human. So we're going to take a hard look at being mentally strong and just the things that come against us and how to kind of rise up, and it's not just going to be me, but I'll be a tag team preaching with a doctor, Dr. Chris Nolet, and he will be adding his expertise into being mentally strong. So I'm really excited about that Sunday. So if there's any Sunday not to miss, it's that one. Invite your friends. So another in the fire. When we think of fire, the word in Merriam-Webster's dictionary means severe trial or ordeal, an intense verbal attack or criticism. And this is what we think of when we think of fire. But the story we're going to look at today in Daniel, the fire looks like it was a bad thing, but the fire was there because of who they were and what they did. It wasn't so much a bad thing as it just brought glory to God because of who they were. The world wants us to fit in. But when Jesus came to earth as the baby in the manger, he didn't come for us to fit in. He came for us to stand out. And so what we have are 4 Hebrew boys growing up. And the Israelites, we know, if you read through the Old Testament, they had disobeyed God so long that God finally said, enough is enough, punishment is coming, you're all going to Babylon as captives. So all of these young boys, the noble young people, the future of Israel, they're all taken captive. Everyone's taken captive and they're led off to Babylon. And the King Nebuchadnezzar says, find some of these noble men, the future of Israel, and bring them in and let's train them up. And so when we think of Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these are young boys, maybe around 13 to 17 years old. Okay? And they're called out from their world, from the Jewish world, and they're brought in before the King Nebuchadnezzar, and right off the bat, they're given new names. And understand this, the names and all of this are to try and help them forget who they are and to bring them into the Babylonian way. So right off the bat, they're given new names like, forget who you were, here's who you are now. And not only that, but as I was studying, they said that they believed the king thought that the Jewish people, all of the luscious food that he could provide for them, that was like a way to get them to stumble, like I can give you all of this yummy food. I can give you all the chicken wings you want, all the nachos and cheese, the pizza. Come on, boys, come and eat. Think about like Hansel and Gretel with the the house made out of candy, and it drew them in. This is what he thought, like, I can draw these guys in with all of this scrumptious food. So you have a name change, you have all this wonderful food, and then the last thing was 3 years of training. So these young men had to go through 3 years of training to learn the Babylonian way, and this was all to try and get them to fit in and forget who they were. Well, as we read, and we'll find out as we can continue on in the message, let them call them by the wrong names, but they wouldn't give in to the food. And they may have had the 3 years of training, but they didn't forget about whose they really were. And this is the hard part, because this is what we all face. The names, they may not call you by your right name. They may call you other names. And then we begin to believe those names. They tempt us with other things, and we may fall prey to that. And then the indoctrination, everything that people throw at us every day of our lives, the things, believe this. Act like this. This isn't for you to stand out. It's so that you can fit in. Fit into this way of life. The world's way of life. And we all face it. I faced it growing up. When I was a kid, up until second grade, I went to one school. I was at North Buffalo. I knew all of the kids there. I'd grown up with them since kindergarten. I had my place in the hierarchy of kids in school. I knew who I was. I fit in. I got along with these kids. They knew who I was. There was a respect factor. And then come second grade, they decided that, we needed to move some kids around. So kids that lived in Cadogan now had to go to Lenape. And so I got moved from North Buffalo to Lenape. And even though there were some of my friends that went there were all new kids. There was all new hierarchy of students. And I didn't fit in. I couldn't find my place. And sometimes that can lead to bad things. Sometimes it can lead to good things. It's all in how you look at it. But most of the time we look at it as a bad thing because we want to fit in. We don't want to get made fun of. We don't want to get called names. We want to be able to go to school and feel confident. We want to be able to go to school and know that there are people who support us and want to encourage us. But sometimes that doesn't always happen. And that's why when we come to church, this is what the church is supposed to be, a place where I can come and be encouraged. I can be built up. I can find friends that speak life into me. When I was growing up, I was a completely different person in school. I was timid and shy. I was afraid. But whenever I got to church and I was around Chris Fox and Chris Nolan and Jordan Hefner and Josh and Jeremy Fisher, it was like I could do anything. I'd cause fights just because I'd hide behind these guys, Chris Fox, Chris Nolan, Jordan. I'd be like, guys, come on, we're going to make sure these guys know you can't mess with me. You got to get through these guys first. Probably not the best thing, but, you're a young kid. I was just letting them know, hey, you may have your hierarchy, but I got mine right here too. But those are the things, that we want to fit in so bad that many times we begin to change who we are. We let the world begin to push us into their box until we don't know who we are anymore. Until we're completely confused. And it's sad. Because, and even in our world, we're not allowed to speak into people to tell them who they are. You can get in trouble for that. You understand that? I just read a testimony of a of a man who was he growing up, he felt like he should have been a woman. And as soon as he said something to his mom, I think she took him to a counselor, and the counselor, the only thing he started saying was, yeah, you should be a woman, let's do this, let's do that, and never like spoke into the guy's life. And so he went through all of this stuff, and now years later he's like, I completely ruined myself. Nobody ever told me that this wasn't the right way, that this wasn't going to make me happy. They just said, yeah, let's do it, let's go. And now he lives with the regret of that. He lives with the regret of trying to fit in. And the world is trying to silence us from helping people not fit in, but stand out. Stand out. You know, the world doesn't hate us because we love Jesus. The world hates us because we stand out. The world can't explain that. They can't explain it away. Why? Why you stand out? Why can't you just be like everybody else and fit in? But we weren't made to fit in. Daniel 3:16-25. As these young men go along, all of a sudden the king comes up with this bright idea. I'm going to create this big gold statue. And a lot of it may have come because of the dream that he had, that he was the gold head and nobody was greater than him. You know, they said maybe because of that he had this grand idea to make this big giant gold statue of himself. And when you heard all of the music, you had to bow down and worship this gold statue. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and we're not sure where Daniel was at the time, if he was away somewhere or what, but they come face to face with, they have to make a choice, fit in or not. And so they just say, you know, this isn't who we are, so we're not going to fit in, we're going to stand out here. And so they make a choice. In Daniel 3, verse 16, starting there, says this: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. Look, there's still a respect factor. They're calling him your majesty. Verse 18, but even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up. Nebuchadnezzar was so furious. See, he was furious because they wouldn't fit in with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that his face become distorted with rage. That's some anger. He commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Then he ordered some of the strongest men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So they tied them up and threw them into the furnace, fully dressed in their pants, turbans, robes, and other garments. And because the king in his anger had demanded such a hot fire in the furnace, the flames killed the soldiers as they threw the 3 men in. Already you can see the miracle is starting. That these guys throwing them in are dying. Verse 23, so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, securely tied, fell into the roaring flames. But suddenly Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement and exclaimed to his advisors, didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace? Yes, your majesty, we certainly did, they replied. Look, Nebuchadnezzar shouted, I see 4 men, unbound, walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like a god. It looks like Jesus Christ in the Old Testament, standing in the fire with them. That's powerful. But it took these 3 young men saying, I'm not going to fit in. I'm going to stand out. And that's my main idea this morning. You were created to stand out, not fit in. You were created to stand out. This is why Jesus came. He didn't come and die on the cross so that we could fit into the world and its ways. He doesn't want us to fit in. He wants us to stand out. And he doesn't want us to stand out because we got a big mouth and we shout it from the rooftops and we pick it and we yell all this nasty stuff, when we don't agree with somebody. Because if you read the story, that's not what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. They just simply didn't bow down to the gold statue. They didn't walk around and say, "Oh, can't believe you're bowing down. Oh, shame on you. No bowing, no bowing. We shall not bow." There was no picketing. There was no going around shouting it from the rooftop. They just simply didn't do it. And they stood out because of it. And that's why people got mad. Why don't they have to do it? They should have to do it. Why am I doing it? If I have to do it, they should have to. Go tell the king. And they told him. And then the king pulls them in. They're like, "Hey, king, sorry, but not sorry. We're not going to bow down." That's what it's about. Standing out, being a light, and just letting it shine. I have a few points to think about. Number one, it's why Jesus came. He came for us to stand out. That's what I just mentioned just a little earlier. It's why he came. He didn't die on the cross so that we could all fit in. He came so we could stand out, so that we could lead the charge of what it means to live life and live it to the full. Isaiah 42, 1-4, and just a few scriptures to think about. "Look at my servant whom I strengthen. He is my chosen one who pleases me. I have put my spirit upon him." This is talking about Jesus. "He will bring justice to the nations. He will not shout or raise his voice in public. He will not crush the weakest reed or put out a flickering candle. He will bring justice to all who have been wronged. He will not falter or lose heart until justice prevails throughout the earth. Even distant lands beyond the sea will wait for his instruction." This is why Jesus came. He didn't come to raise his voice to lead this public charge. He just came to let the light shine and to make sure the weakest one out there, the flickering candle, was not put out, but was breathed life into so that they could stand out. Isaiah 61, 1-4, "The Spirit of the sovereign Lord is upon me." This is about Jesus. "For the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to comfort the brokenhearted and to proclaim that captives will be released and prisoners will be freed. He has sent me to tell those who mourn that the time of the Lord's favor has come, and with it the day of God's anger against their enemies. To all who mourn in Israel, he will give a crown of beauty for ashes, a joyous blessing instead of mourning, festive praise instead of despair. In their righteousness they will be like great oaks that the Lord has planted for his own glory." We'll stand out like a great oak. "They will rebuild the ancient ruins, repairing cities destroyed long ago. They will revive them, though they have been deserted for many generations." Jesus came to do this for us. 1 Peter 2, 9-11. "But you are not like that, for you are a chosen people. You are a royal priest, a holy nation, God's very own possession. As a result, you can show others the goodness of God, for he called you out of the darkness into his wonderful light." Once you had no identity as a people, now you are God's people. Once you received no mercy, now you have received God's mercy. Dear friends, I warn you as temporary residents and foreigners to keep away from worldly desires that wage war against your very souls, that would want to make you fit in, because you weren't created to fit in, you were created to stand out. I added that part. That's not really in there. That's why Jesus came. Number 2, he came so that we would never be alone. You are never alone. When you take that stand for him, you are not alone. He's there. They knew it. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they said, we're taking this stand because we know God is with us. But even if he doesn't deliver us, we're still not bowing down because we know that God has bigger and better things for us. So we're not going to bow our knee. Isaiah 43, 1-3 says this, "But now, O Jacob, listen to the Lord who created you. O Israel, the one who formed you says, do not be afraid, for I have ransomed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you go through deep waters, what? I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up. The flames will not consume you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior." He's with us. We used to sing a song when I was a kid. Fear not. Anybody remember that one? Fear not, for I know you were called by my name. Child, you are mine. When you walk through the waters, I will be there. You are, I can't even remember all the words, but I just remember, you are, you remember that? I always liked that little part, you shout it out. I think when I'd play the drums, extra loud crash on the cymbal, really emphasize. And I wasn't caged back then. No cage. I could play as loud as I wanted. No cage. Now they're trying to put a roof on me and everything. There was a funny thing I sent Lauren about cage-free drummers, We're into cage-free drummers here at this church. Gary and I are going to stand out there, no cage for us. And but he's with us. We're not alone. Even when we feel alone, he's with us. This is where faith comes in, knowing that God is with us. We're not alone. Even when things don't turn out the way we want. This is the struggle that we have. Things don't turn out the way we want them to. And then we feel like we're alone. I caught a blip of Stephen Furtick was talking to his staff, and he's saying how things are misquoted. And he said, like Jeremiah 29:11, we always quote, God has plans for us. And he's like, the problem is we quote that because we think God has the plans that we have for us. And he goes, that's not the plans God has for us. It says, I have plans for you. And so when things don't go the way we want, then all of a sudden we're like, oh, God's left me alone. And we struggle. And we forget that God has the plan. And his plan might not look like our plan. Are we going to be okay with that? Or do we feel alone? We're going to feel alone, but we're not alone. And so we put our faith and our hope in God. This is where joy comes from. We put our faith and hope in God that something's going to break here, that I'm not alone. I might feel alone, but I'm not. He's with me in the fire. Number 3, my third point, just when we stand out, it starts in the small decisions. And sometimes we fail at the small decisions. I fail at the small decisions. Why? Because we want to fit in. Anyone ever, you ever catch yourself? Little things, you know? Somebody says something to you, oh yeah, I know that, and you don't. Oh yeah, oh no, I got you. Meanwhile, you're like, what did I just do? Those little decisions that we make, you know, that get us into big problems. You know, hey, can you help me with my car? Oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. Call me up. I remember, I have a little bit of knowledge of electricity. And so I know Chris was having some problems the one night, and he calls me up, and I'm like, oh yeah, let me come and just start ripping and tearing, and we'll put some electricity in your house. And then I got there and realized I didn't know what I was doing. Why did I tell him this? I don't know what I'm doing. We had to call for other help just to get his problem solved. You know, just those little decisions. For the Hebrew guys, it was just that decision not to eat that rich food. Daniel 1:8, but Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to them by the king. He asked the chief of staff for permission not to eat these unacceptable foods. Big, delicious baby back ribs dripping with barbecue sauce. Shrimp cocktails all over the place. Think about it, you know. Daniel was like, we don't want this. Give us carrots and celery. Yes. No ribs. No shrimp. Put that all away. No shrimp for you, Pastor Art. Just carrots and celery. And broccoli. And then Daniel 1:15 says this, at the end of 10 days, Daniel and his 3 friends looked healthier and better nourished than the young men who had been eating the food assigned by the king. This actually means that they were getting fatter. They were getting fat off eating carrots and celery. Don't tell me vegetables are healthy for you now. They were maintaining who they were and they're looking rather fit. Eating carrots and celery. But they made that small decision. We're not going to eat, so that when the big decision came of bow or not bow, they didn't bow. It's the little things. When we choose to stand out, it's just those little things. It may not be the big things right off the bat. It's just the little things. Hey, why don't we take this kid's pencil? Why don't we do this? You know, I remember playing with kids, in the community, and they'd come to my grandma's house, and they might bring baseball cards, and she had this flower plant, and every now and then, when the kid wasn't looking, I'd slide one of his cards under the flower pot, I'll get that later. Little bad decisions that I made, that sometimes led to just more dumb decisions. And then thinking you could get out of everything by fighting. I might be bigger and stronger than the kids. What's he going to do? Little bad decisions led to bigger bad decisions. But for them, they made a little decision. We're not going to eat this food. We're going to stay with our carrots, celery, broccoli. We're going to stick with this. And just see how we look in 10 days. And they looked great. And then whenever it came time to make bigger and harder decisions, they already had a foundation. They already had a foundation of not fitting in, but standing out. Because who wouldn't stand out turning down baby back ribs and shrimp? Everyone else is probably scratching their head like, are you kidding me? Give me another rack of those ribs. But they were like, no, little things. so that we stand out, and not in a negative way. We just want to stand out so that people see we love Jesus. And people are going to misinterpret it. They're going to misinterpret it. Probably thinking, oh, you people, you just think you're better than us eating your vegetables. My wife's not here, so I'll pick on her. She uses Norwex. Sorry, Jen. Sometimes I feel like, oh, she uses Norwex. She's better than me. I just want a regular towel. You know what I'm saying? So you get this attitude. They're like, what do you think? You're better than us? Eat your carrots, and I'm on. Give me some more ribs and shrimp. Give me some more of this. And they had all these people looking at them. But it was the little things that they stood out for the king. They're like, we're not trying to make ourselves better than you. We just don't want to eat that. Because these are the things we face from the world to just get us to fit in. To say, you know what, forget about it. Throw me some ribs and shrimp on my plate. And I'm by no means saying don't eat ribs and shrimp, because those are two things I like. And then number 4, we just got to trust. We know them by Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but their real names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. We know Daniel by his real name, but we never remember the other 3's real names. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They trusted in the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And it wasn't easy. Don't think that it was easy for them. Why? Because they're in Babylon, because they have just been judged by God. They're now captives in a land that is not their own. So for them to trust in God, that's a big deal. That wasn't small on their part. That was big. That was huge. But for them, they had a faith that God is who he says he is. And they trusted. They trusted in God. And we have a God, like I said, who's come and he's gone through everything that we've gone through. Hebrews 4:15 says, this high priest of ours understands our weaknesses, for he faced all of the same testings we do, yet he did not sin. He knows what it's like. He had everything thrown at him. He probably had people, come on. And he did. Fit in, Jesus. Come on, fit in. Be the man that we want you to be. Why you got to stand out? Just fit in. Fit in with our view of everything. And Jesus just said, I'm here to stand out. I'm here to stand out. He knows what we go through. We just got to trust in him. Isaiah 53:3, he was despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, acquainted with deepest grief. We turned our backs on him and looked the other way. He was despised and we did not care. He knows what we go through. He knows what it's like. And yet he did not sin. And he comes to stand with us in the fire. The fire isn't a bad thing. The fire came because they stood out. If we're going to stand out, fires are going to come. But thanks be to God, we have a Savior who's in the fire with us. That's what Christmas is about. He's come. He's with us. Emmanuel, God with us. And so as we come to the end, if we want to all stand to our feet.